afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me? I felt like I was waking up at home this morning when I came out and felt the wind. I wasn't quite expecting it here, but it felt just like being in Nag's Head. Afternoon, I'd like to welcome everybody to this February 2026 meeting of the North Carolina Coastal Resources Commission. This time, before we call the roll, I would like to remind everybody that the State Government Ethics Act mandates at the beginning of any meeting, the chair shall remind all the members of their duty to avoid conflicts of interest and inquire as to whether any member knows of any conflict of interest or potential conflict with respect to matters to come before the commission. If any member knows of conflict, please state so as the roll is called. Angela? Present, no known conflicts. Neil Andrew.
Present, and I would like to make a comment regarding one of the items on our agenda. I am a professional engineer in private practice that does structural and marine engineering. I'm located in Wilmington, North Carolina, and because of that, I do have clients that live on Figure 8 Island. However, I have had zero communication or correspondence with any of those clients regarding the variance that's on our agenda.
Thank you.
Larry Baldwin.
Present, no known conflict.
D.R. Bryan. Bob Emery.
Present, and we have on the agenda an item about the donation of property from the North Carolina Land Trust to the state, and more specifically the Division of Coastal Management. And I'm the president of the Land Trust.
Congratulations.
So when that comes up, I'll leave the table.
Jordan Tennessee.
Present in a conflict with the Figure 8 variance. I'll need to be recused from that.
Robert Hyde. Sheila Holman.
Present, no known conflict.
Steve King. Lauren Salter.
Present, no conflict.
Steve Shuttleworth. Present, no known conflict. Earl Smith.
Present, no known conflicts.
That's 10, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you all. Sorry.
No conflicts.
Thank you. Just a couple brief comments this afternoon. Just to let everybody know, we did have a formal executive committee earlier in either late January, early February. I'm sorry, my memory fails me. And we had that meeting formally in order to consider a nomination from Dr. Moore, who's chair of the science panel, with a recommendation from her to appoint another member to the science panel, and that will be coming up later on our agenda. But I would also like to extend my thanks and the Commission's thanks to Dr. Moore and the Science Panel for all the work that they've done on hardened structures, inlet hazard area boundaries, sea level rise, and volunteering to work with us for a hardened structure recommendation. We appreciate their proactive sending recommendations to expand the Science Panel and other issues for us to consider. Thank you very much. Next, Angela, if you would, approval of the August 27th and 28th 2025 meeting minutes. Is there a motion on that?
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
Motion on the floor. Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Emery. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor? All opposed? Appears to be unanimous. Next up is the approval of minutes from the November 19 and 20, 2025 meeting minutes. Entertain a motion.
Madam Chair, I move approval of the November 19th and 20th, 2025 meeting minutes.
Thank you very much.
I'll second.
Second by Commissioner Baldwin. Any further discussion? All in favor? All opposed? So carried unanimously. There's one change to the agenda on the septic tank discussion. That's going to be informational only. That will not be, that's not an action item at this time. Staff would like to have more time to work on that. So just to let everybody know that will be coming up for information. Tancred, the floor is yours. Oh, I'm sorry, Bobby, I'm not trying to cut you out. Y'all had an interesting meeting this morning.
Good afternoon, everybody. CRC AC met earlier this morning. We had 3 items on our agenda. The first was the inlet hazard area setback issues. That came before you all at the last meeting, and there was some discussion at the CRAC about that hybrid vegetation line. The CRAC had concerns about grandfathering and the way that worked. When we came to the board, you all had similar concerns, and you asked us to get a group of staff, members of the CRC and members of CRAC together to try to have some discussions about how to work through those issues. So I asked Cameron and Ken, they came and met with us. Bob Emery and Earl Smith were there, and then me and Spencer Rogers and Debbie Smith, we all met down in Ocean Isle for most of an afternoon. It was a 4 or 5 hour long meeting to go through all of those things to try to figure out how to do something that solves some of the problems that we have at the inlet hazard area. If you recall, the science panel had worked through and had come up with some erosion rates, and at the CRAC level, most of us agreed that those erosion rates were as close as we could get to being correct. And what that meant was that you had some very volatile areas around our inlets, and I guess that's why they're designated separately as inlet hazard areas. And what happens there is those areas, they accrete and erode on shorter cycles than what you might find in areas outside the inlet hazard area, so that when you develop there, you got to be careful where you put it. And the science panel had drawn a line that would put everybody kind of out of harm's way. So if you did it at that level, you would be out of harm's way, and it would allow the ocean to erode and accrete in front of what your development would be. That all sounds good, and everybody acknowledges that that makes perfect sense, except that when you start putting that on the ground, you find that you have, I don't know, over 200 houses that would be instantly non-conforming uses, and then you have another like 500 houses that would somehow or another be impacted by that line. And so when we had our meetings, we started thinking about, well, what that means is if you start doing fiscal analysis of that, that's going to get you over the thresholds that probably even you can adopt. You're going to wind up having to go to the legislature to get that adopted because it would impact so many dwellings. And we didn't think that that was going to be reasonably possible. And so we looked back again at what are we trying to solve, and when you, assuming that you've even adopted that hazard line, under our current grandfathering rules, without changing that, many of those houses that would be in front of that line could still be rebuilt if they were damaged and if something happened to them. And so the hybrid vegetation line didn't solve anything with regard to those houses. A number of the houses were behind it, and so for the houses that were behind it, it wouldn't matter either way, but for those that were in front of it, they could still come back in and develop under our current rules, under the current exceptions and grandfathering that we have in there. The problem with doing nothing is that if you have accretion, let's just say you had a 5-year period of accretion, all of a sudden your vegetation lines move seaward. Now somebody that was built here and the sea's here can now replace their house closer to the ocean. And you really, and then in the next 5 to 7 years, which could be an erosion cycle, you've put that house in peril and you've allowed them to build out there where they really shouldn't be. And so one of the things we have to try to figure out how to do is to keep the grandfathering in place so nobody loses the value of their property, do the best we can to keep people out of harm's way, and the way to do that was to limit people from moving their homes seaward. So as we worked through the maps and looked at it, we first thought of let's draw a line in front of all the existing houses and make that the development line. And so if your house burns down, gets destroyed by erosion, whatever happens, and you want to rebuild it, then you have to do it on the landward side of that development line. And that all sounded like a good idea until we tried to put it in practice, and we left the meeting thinking that was going to be the solution that we came up to you with, and we had another meeting scheduled for a couple weeks later to look at whatever staff did with those conversations. And what we found was that what we were thinking is you could just draw that line and you could put survey numbers on it and somebody could go look at a map and know exactly where they could build. And that was a lot more difficult than anybody anticipated. But if you could accomplish the same thing without having to do anything, simply by saying, if your house is damaged or destroyed, you have to rebuild it if you meet the grandfathering rules in the footprint that it was in and no closer to the ocean. So it took into account then, and it allowed all those houses that were grandfathered. It didn't create new nonconformities, and it prevented folks from moving closer to the ocean with that cyclical accretion. So it sort of solved all the problems that we could solve. It wouldn't have a large fiscal impact, so we wouldn't have to go to the legislature to get it done, and it didn't really take any property rights away from anybody that they don't already have, other than they wouldn't get the benefit of that cyclical accretion. And so it seemed like a win-win all. On top of that, the other thought was, if that's the goal, then when you rebuild it, then you need to rebuild it as landward as you can based on the community setbacks from wherever it is that you're trying to do that. And so then you've kept houses from going closer to the ocean. You've allowed people to rebuild their houses, which is what the grandfathering is intended to do. And you've also moved them further back when they do rebuild so that they, one, have a longer life, and two, are further out of harm's way. And it seemed to accomplish all of the goals that we were trying to accomplish with that hybrid vegetation line, other than, there was some discussion about people thinking, hey, I'm in front of the hybrid vegetation line, I'm safe. That's really not what we're saying. What we're saying is the hybrid vegetation line is where you can expect the ocean to be at some point. But since you're already there, and if you want to put it back there, we're not going to stop you, but you can't get any closer to the ocean, and we're going to move you back as far as we can to keep you as far out of harm's way as we can, but we're not taking your property or preventing you from otherwise developing it. So that was the logic that we used. That was how we got to there, and we're recommending rule changes that, one, adopt the erosion rates that were presented to us by the science panel, but then do the rule change that Ken will explain to you in much better detail and clarity later, I think, in the meeting, that accomplish those goals and do those things that we just described. So that's what the CRAC recommends, and that's where we think that we should be headed, and we think that that is the best we can do to solve those problems, given that we don't think we could probably get the hybrid vegetation line passed. So that was the first thing on our agenda. The second thing on our agenda was a summary of the North Carolina sediment criteria rules. And again, this came up several meetings ago. We have sediment criteria when you do beach nourishment. Your sand sizes have to be whatever that criteria is. There was some discussion a couple of meetings ago that if that sand sediment size was broader than it is, then it would make more sand sources available. And the issue was, and in talking to Spencer, who sat on the science panel and worked on that stuff, is that we adopted a rule that set the grain sizes, but really the science panel was saying, hey, here's kind of what it is, use your judgment, this is kind of what we're going to do. And in order to be able to enforce it and have a rule, then something more specific than maybe what the science panel intended was done. We're in a place now where beach nourishment is becoming a lot more expensive, and we're using up sand at a high rate. And so to the extent that you can safely use different size sediment than the rules currently allow, then you've expanded your sand sources, and you've also potentially made sand sources remain closer to your beaches than they are now, which then helps you on the cost. And so there's some benefit to looking at that. So what the CRC is asking you all to do is to direct the science panel and your staff to look at the sedimentation criteria that you have and see if it can be safely broadened. Nobody's asking to let's go put boulders on the beach or put mud on the beach that kills all the benthic creatures and all that sort of thing. But if there's some flexibility, as we think there probably is, to make the range of sand broader than it is, and you can do that safely, then that seems like a reasonable way, again, to help mitigate some of the costs and expand some of the sand sources so that beach nourishment can be viable longer along our coast, especially given that as of right now, that's the only tool that we have. We need to extend that as long as we can, and we need to make that, as cost-effective as we can make it. So the CRAC is asking that you direct the science panel to take a look at that and have staff take a look at that and come back to the CRAC with those findings so that we can look at whether there's some basis to modify the rules with regard to sedimentation size. And then the last thing, we've been, I don't know if you all, if it ever came as far to you or not up here, but the Sentinel criteria to put the monitoring devices on the beach during a hurricane, we have been working on that for a while. We started out, okay, what are we going to do about Sentinels? It then got broadened to what are we going to do about all kinds of research tools. That became too broad and too time-consuming to figure all that out in time to allow the Sentinels to get on the beach maybe this hurricane season so they can start monitoring and using data to help us talk about hurricanes and those kind of things. So we narrowed it down at our last CRAC meeting and asked staff to just come back with some rules that dealt with the Sentinels only, because those are the ones that we need quickly. Those are the ones that locations can't be determined until we know where the storms are coming. So it's hard to, pre-permit them, if you will. And so staff did that, and they came back with a set of rules. We went through those rules this morning. There were a couple of changes. I don't think there are anything earth-shattering on them. The rule originally was set up for a one-year term, and then you had to come back and do it all again. That seemed like too short of a time to us. A lot of work goes in to get the permits. If we made that a 5-year rule, then the researchers could come in, they could get a permit that lasted 5 years, and then each hurricane season, they could decide where they wanted to go, get their local permissions, and go put their Sentinel site up without having to every year resubmit data, resubmit all that stuff. And so we suggested that that be changed to 5 years. There was a second provision in there that said that the applicant had to be the title holder of the land. Well, a research institute's never going to be the title holder of the land, and so we suggested that there'd be some language in there that said they got to have the permission of the landowner to go on wherever they're going to put it. And then the third thing was an option that was presented by staff. There was, and I'll let them explain it to you whenever we get there, but they had a specific provision that accepted the Sentinel sites out of some of the rules, and they suggested that maybe we should change that with a more generic description that says we accept from the rules anything that is otherwise permitted under the rules, which would accomplish the same thing, but as they develop other rules and do other things, you wouldn't have to keep adding another line for this exception, that except you allow it over here to be exempt, then it becomes exempt under the rules. And so we suggested that as well. So with those three exceptions, or amendments, the CRAC recommends that you approve those Sentinel, or move forward with those Sentinel rules with those three changes. And that would be what we did in our meeting, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Bobby. Y'all had some really thorough discussion. Questions from commissioners about any of the items that were discussed today? Jordan?
On the inlet hazard, is that going to be discussed?
That will be discussed,
Okay.
yes.
All right.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Bobby. Appreciate it. All of the items that were discussed from the CRAC will be discussed first thing in the morning under Chair's agenda, so that everybody can think about what was said this evening and then have recommendations about how we move forward. Before we go any further, Lauren, everybody at their place has a copy of the Cape Lookout National Seashore Paradigm for Coastal System Ethic. Lauren, thank you for making sure we all got those. We appreciate it. It's by Dr. Riggs, who used to be a member of our science panel, a very valuable member. Well, thank you very much. I would suggest everybody take a look at it and read it thoroughly. There's a lot of good information in there. Thank you very much. Thank you, Bob. Tancred, I believe now is your time.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon to you and members of the Commission. Good afternoon to the Advisory Council, to guests here and online, and to DCM staff. Thank you, Assistant Secretary Dello. It's always good to have you at these meetings. Thanks for joining us. Before we get started, I wanted to note that due to some great work from some of our staff, including Angela, Rachel, Michelle, Ellie Davis, and support from Jesse Bissett at the EMF, we have brought these meeting streamings in-house. So now we have the equipment ourselves, and we'll be streaming these meetings ourselves. So thank them for stepping up, and hopefully that goes smoothly going forward. Madam Chair, I'll start with the regulatory updates. So DCM issued a permit to UNCW in January for dredging at their docking facility at the Center for Marine Science. They've experienced a lot of shoaling in that area, and it's made it hard to use their vessels. The permit includes mitigation in the form of P&A enhancement, and that's going to be creating oyster shell living shorelines, about 25,000 square feet of those, to create nursery areas to replace the areas being dredged. Earlier this month, the DCM issued a permit to Dare County for a beach nourishment project up there at Buxton. We're working with the county, with the National Park Service, and property owners to deal with development within that nourishment template, including debris such as derelict sandbags that need to be removed prior to that project. Along with that, we also issued a letter of exemption to Dare County for the repair of Buxton Groin number 3. The county's request included repair of the sheet pile groin and armor stone surrounding the structure. DCM determined that since more than 50% of the structure still exists, it can be repaired under the CAMA and regulatory exemptions in your rules. The county expects to complete both projects this summer. Yesterday, DCM issued an objection to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers federal consistency determination for the Wilmington Harbor dredging project. Our objection was based on a combination of lack of sufficient information to determine the impacts from PFAS and flooding, and anticipated significant adverse impacts to fisheries resources, wildlife habitat, and cultural and historic resources. As a reminder, that project proposed widening and deepening parts of the main channel and anchorage basin within the Wilmington Harbor, beneficial placement of the dredged material, and mitigation to help balance the project's adverse impacts. DCM coordinated its review with several state resource agencies, including DMF, WRC, DWR, and invited public comment late last year. All of the project documents, including the letter of objection, are available on our website if anyone wants to dig in and learn more. There are multiple courses of action available going forward, including mediation with the Corps, negotiation to get to a point where we can agree on a path forward. In planning and resiliency, since the last CRC meeting, the division has certified 4 land use plans: Craven County, Pender County, Town of Oak Island, the City of Southport, and we approved an amendment for the Town of Morehead City. We closed on the acquisition of a 3/4 acre parcel in the Town of Bellhaven to expand access at Harbor Park, and the Town of Winton completed renovations to its Town Park Pier and restrooms. The pre-application period is open now for the Public Beach and Coastal Waterfront Access Grant Program. We're piloting an idea from the interagency work group that we released last year on threatened structures to look at acquisitions of these threatened structures using this fund. If there's a willing seller that was able to come in and say, we would like to use this program, can we use those funds then under the access program to work with the local government to purchase that property? Given the limited funding available through the program each year, our goal would be to acquire properties at fair market value or the equivalent of the expected NFIP policy payout of $250,000, whichever is less, and excluding the cost of removing the structure. Last week, we held an applicant workshop for the program. It was attended by 20 local government representatives. It reviewed eligible projects, program requirements, And as I said, pre-applications are on our website, and the deadline is April 24th. Rachel Love-Adrick and Mike Christianberry can help with any questions on that program. Since November, the Resilient Coastal Communities Program has continued to make strong progress, supporting 19 communities currently as they advance through the engagement, risk assessment, vulnerability mapping, and resilience planning. In Down East Carteret County, RCCP staff met with county officials and the local community to support ongoing resilience planning efforts. The contractors began field surveys to survey infrastructure and existing additions, do hydraulic modeling, and prioritize future projects for North River, Stacy, and Davis. We've restructured the RCCP steering committee following an external evaluation conducted by Dr. Miyuki Hino at UNC Chapel Hill. That evaluation found that the program is effectively reaching a wide range of communities, building real local capacity, and helping local governments better understand the risks, strengthen partnerships, and confidently pursue outside funding. It also noted that the smallest towns, which is those under 1,000 people, remain underrepresented in the program. And this highlights an opportunity for us to tailor support and expand our outreach within the program. Moving forward, the committee will focus on how to better incorporate future conditions, nature-based solutions, and improve community engagement into the RCCP. Staff are also continuing to explore how to use DEQ's Flood Resiliency Blueprint tool. Last week, DEQ Blueprint staff provided a virtual hands-on training to our RCCP contractors that walked them through how the tool can be used for risk and vulnerability mapping, uploading and tracking flood mitigation strategies, choosing from a suite of strategies based on the best available data and modeling, and then understanding how projects can be funded through the blueprint. To improve data accessibility, the RCCP has partnered with an NC State GIS master's student on a pilot project to centralize RCCP GIS data. Starting with 5 or 6 communities, this project will create a functional ArcGIS hub and a roadmap for scaling data collection, standardization, visualization, and sharing, making RCCP data more accessible and useful for communities, practitioners, and state agencies. Work is underway to integrate resilience into CAMA land use plans with public workshops in Ocracoke, Pamco County, and Elizabeth City. Those were last week, I believe. These efforts aim to reduce planning redundancies and help communities align future land use planning with the resilience planning they're already doing through the RCCP. The Coastal Reserves Rules, NC AC 070, are scheduled to be reviewed by the Rules Review Commission in April 2026 as a part of the legislative periodic review and expiration of existing rules process. The public comment period for the proposed initial determination of necessary or unnecessary was presented to you at the August meeting and closed in December of last year. We received 1 comment, and a report was prepared and submitted by the organization masonboro.org, which evaluated the rules and the applicability to the organization's mission and Masonboro Island. The department is now preparing its final report, which is due to the RRC in March. The reserve will host a Discover the Reserve tour this spring in Kitty Hawk Woods Reserve, tentatively scheduled for May 1st. The event will also highlight the division's public access program and the RCCP, as well as DMF's Marine Patrol. CRC members and CRAC members will be invited, so please stay tuned for an invitation to that event. In budget news, Congress has approved our federal funding for this fiscal year. We've been at the same level of federal funding now for the last few years, which is good news in the sense that we haven't had any cuts, but it's also challenging because of the inflationary pressures on budgets everywhere. Some staff news: Whitney Jenkins, our Training and Engagement Coordinator, was awarded the Training and Engagement Program Award of Excellence by NOAA and her peers within the National Estuarine Research Reserve System. This was in December, and this is for her significant contributions to the National Training and Engagement Program, the North Carolina Reserve, and the Reserve System as a whole. Whitney's accomplishments are vast. I can spend a lot of time going through those, and her work has local, state, and national impact. It's a very well-deserved award, and I like to tell folks she's the best in the business, so this is just a testament to that. Christian Gillikin, get a hand. Or stand, you can stand. Christian Gillikin joined DCM on January 5th as our newest field rep in Morehead City. He's a native of Colorado County, graduate from NC State in 2025 with a bachelor's in marine science and a minor in environmental science. He's fit right in and he's learning voraciously, so glad to have him on board. Morgan Penrose has moved into the newly created Southern Site Specialist position at the Reserve after working with us in a similar position on a temporary basis for the last 3 years. Morgan will assist in stewarding our southern sites with a focus on enhancing and promoting habitat resilience. She received her bachelor's in science in marine biology from UNCW. I'd like to recognize a couple of folks, Kelly Spivey and Stephen Lane, for completing 30 years of service with the state. I think Kelly's here. There's Kelly. And Angela Willis, Heather Styron, and Kathy Brittingham for completing 25 years with the state. Science panel news, Dr. Jesse McNinch has stepped down from your science panel. He's moved out of state. He was on science panel for 6 years. We've made him a certificate of appreciation on behalf of the commission, and we will send that to him at his new address in Michigan. Madam Chair, I'll end with some bittersweet news for DCM. Our longtime and senior field rep in the Washington office, Kent Vaughn, is retiring from the state with 30 years of distinguished service and is taking on a new role with Hyde County. Congratulations to Chris Noble. I'm going to invite Kent and Kelly Spivey to come forward, please, for a presentation of certificate.
Yes, I do have a few things that I would like to say. Madam Chair, members of the commission, good afternoon. Again, my name is Kelly Spivey. I'm the district manager for the Washington office. I want to take the time to recognize Kent Vaughn. Kent's retiring from the division with 30 years of service. Kent started his career with the Division of Marine Fisheries in March of 1996. He worked there 7 years, and then he served with the Department of Agriculture in the Soil and Water in the Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program, better known as CRIP. After that, he served 7 years, 6 years as a field rep with the Division of Coastal Management. He served in Pamlico County, Hyde County, and Eastern Beaufort County. And I would like to say that his experience with working with farmers, landholders in the CREP program, as well as commercial fishermen with the DMF has been instrumental in his success as a DCM field rep, especially in the agricultural and commercial fishing communities of these counties. His experience and knowledge as a licensed captain have benefited the division greatly in third-party appeals, hearings, and the navigational questions that we frequently answer. Kent's always exemplified the positive qualities of a field rep by being professional, courteous, respectful, and truthful, all while implementing your rules. Kent's retiring, although he's retiring, he's going to work for Hyde County in the Soil and Water Division, so he's going to continue his public service, and I know Chris is very thankful that he's coming to work for him, so I'm going to miss you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Kent, certificate of appreciation for 30 years of distinguished service. Thank you for everything you've done for the state, for DCM, and thank you.
That's beautiful. Thank you.
There's a lot of institutional knowledge that is walking out the door. And that seems to be happening a lot. We've been fortunate to have people that have stayed for 25 and 30 years, and we appreciate your service to the people.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you very much.
Jonathan? And where's Ron?
President Washington staff. Thank you. All right. 1, 2. Thank you all.
Well done, Tancred.
Yes, thank you, ma'am.
Before we go any further, I'd like for Assistant Secretary Dello, just please stand so the commission will know who she is when she comes in the room now. We thank you very much for coming. We appreciate DEQ's support of its commissions and staff and programs and the interest that everyone has by showing up. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Okay. Thank you, Tancred, for your report. Next up, I believe it was sent out to everybody, Dr. Williams's CV. He has been proposed by Dr. Moore to become a member of the science panel. At this time, I'll entertain a motion. The executive committee unanimously recommends him for appointment to the science panel. And we're putting it forward to the commission for their full vote. So anybody would like to make a motion? Larry, I see your hand.
So move.
Is there a second? Second by Chip Holman. All in favor? All opposed? We appreciate people's willingness to serve on a commission at no cost benefit to themselves, but the benefit to the people of North Carolina is undeniable. Thank you. Next up, variances. Morning, Christie, or good afternoon, Christie. This is for the Commissioner Hennessy. Motion to excuse Commissioner Hennessy. Seconded. Second by Commissioner Salter. All in favor? All opposed? You're excused.
All right, good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the Commission. I am DEQ Assistant General Counsel, and I'll be representing the DCM staff in this variance by a number of lot owners on the north end of Figure 8 Island. Charles Baldwin is here. He's the attorney representing the petitioners in this case. But first, we're going to start with DCM Field Representative Phil DeAngelis, who's going to walk us through the PowerPoint.
Hey, everyone. Madam Chair and members of the
Afternoon.
Commission. I will be discussing the Figure 8 Island Ocean Hazard AEC sandbag revetment. Here is an overview of the area we're focusing on. The project area is the northern section of Figure 8 Island, just below Riches Inlet in northern New Hanover County. Is that better? Closing in, you can see here, using imagery from New Hanover County GIS, Riches Inlet, and then the project area location of Comer Road and Inlet Hook Road. The project area extends from 5 Comer to 17 Comer Road, and then followed by 3 to 10 on Inlet Hook. The project area on 5 through 17 Comer Road includes 2 right-of-ways, one just after 8 Comer and one at 17 Comer. Using Figure 8 HOA drone data collected in end of January on the 28th, you can see the Comer Road existing project area with the existing sandbags. Then to the north, you have 3 through 10 Inlet Hook, looking at the project area here as well with the existing sandbags. Again, with the HOA drone collected imagery. So right here, these are the drawings provided by the agent for the permittees for the proposed area of sandbag revetments. Right here is on the southern end from 5 through 8 Comer. And you can see the dimensions are 12 feet in height above sea level, and then you have 40 feet base width, followed by 90 feet of a shoreline per parcel. From here, we are looking at 9 Comer through, I believe, 14 Comer Road with the same dimensions. From here, we are going from 14 Comer to 17 Comer Road with the same dimensions. At this point, we are moving on from Comer Road to Inlet Hook. So we begin at 4 Inlet Hook, all the way down to, I believe, 10 Inlet Hook in this image here. So this is a DC image of the project area from 5 to 8 Comer Road and the HOA access facing south on February 6, 2026. At the same right-of-way access, looking north, this is the DC image of 9 and 10 Comer Road. Continuing on from 11 to 13 Comer Road, and me for reference is the southern-facing direction of Figure 8 Island. Then looking north at 14 to 15 Comer Road. And then looking south at 16 to 17 Comer Road. Now looking north from here, we have 3 to 4 Inlet Hook. Again, me for reference at the extent of the sandbags. Looking north again at 5 to 6 Inlet Hook. And then the DC image of the project area of 7 to 8 Inlet Hook facing south. And then finishing at 9 to 10 Inlet Hook, again, me for reference. All right, Christy will take over here.
All right, I'm going to run through the facts and then go through the staff's positions on the 4 criteria, and then invite Mr. Baldwin at the end to come up and argue the petitioner's positions. So as we saw in this case, there are 23 petitioners, which is 21 lot owners plus the 2 access ways owned by the HOA. All of these lots are developed with homes except for the 2 access ways, and also 13 Comer. There had been a single-family residence there that was relocated landward some time ago, and new structures exist on that lot now that are water and septic, a patio, and a fenced area and driveway, so not a single-family residence. The whole stretch of the site is bordered on the east by the Atlantic Ocean, on the west by Comer Road and Inlet Hook Road and Beach Road North. The first owner outside of the row of petitioners is 4 Comer Road LLC to the south, and then on the north is Chris Venno. These lots are located, all of them in the Ocean Erodible AEC, and the northernmost 14 of the 21 structures are within the currently applicable inlet hazard AEC, which is the 1978 report that is in the rules as we know them now. In your materials is also images from the DCM map viewer, interactive map viewer, that shows the current inlet hazard area, and then the proposed new inlet hazard area, which would encompass all 21 of these lots. That's in your materials. This area is not subject to a pre-project or static vegetation line, and so the setbacks are measured landward from the vegetation line as that's defined in your rules. Measured erosion, based on 2020 data, had this area ranging from 5.3 feet per year to 11.5 feet per year of measured erosion. Petitioners have obtained an affidavit from Kevin R. Boge, PhD. A copy of that is included in your materials. Staff do note that it's a sworn affidavit, but are not able to stipulate to the truth of his statements, but obviously it is a sworn affidavit. That information in that affidavit includes his background and education. It also states that the threatened properties are subject to cyclical patterns of erosion and accretion that are associated with the changes to location and orientation of Rich's Inlet. He states that from 2014 to 2022, the north end experienced sand accretion and growth of stable natural vegetation. However, since 2022, the properties have experienced rapid erosion due to an unfavorable configuration of the Rich's Inlet channel. He also continues that the cause of the severe erosion right now is two things: the temporarily degraded condition of the beach platform owing to the unfavorable configuration of Rich's Inlet from 2021 through 24, and also the acute impacts of sustained high water levels and seas from the multiple storms that occurred this past September through mid-October or so. The first sandbag permits on Figure 8 were issued to 16 Comer and 4 Inlet Hook in 2001. Also in 2003, this commission granted a variance to the owners of 15 lots, which were 9 Comer up to 8 Inlet Hook, to allow them to install a larger sandbag structure 10 feet high and 40 feet wide. And I included a copy of the Commission's 2003 variance order in your materials, as well as a stipulated exhibit. The new sandbag revetments were recently installed that were issued pursuant to general permits in early and late 2025. After the completion of the installation of the regular size sandbag revetments, the coast experienced substantial storm events in the fall, and it caused further erosion on the landward side of the recently installed sandbags. Until the erosion events this past fall, most of the previously existing sandbags had been covered with dunes and vegetation due to natural accretion and nourishment events since approximately 2015. So I think in the pictures you saw some of the old bags versus the newer bags. The proposed sandbag structure project is, they're seeking for it to be 40 feet base width and 12 feet tall compared to mean sea level. So based on the proposed site plans that were included in the materials, the alignment would be located above normal high water and waterward of the existing erosion and escarpment, so within the footprint of the recently installed sandbag revetments. Just a little history going back. In 2003, the General Assembly enacted the hardened structures ban at GS 113A 115.1 that generally bans permanent erosion control structures on the ocean front. The parties are aware that the Figure 8 Homeowners Association looked at the potential of a terminal groin on the north end of the island at one point after that law change. But a terminal groin has not been pursued by the HOA. Through communication with the HOA's representative, David Kellum, he indicated the following, and this is included in an email in your materials. The HOA has a permit number 6-01 for dredging Nixon's Channel, which results in approximately 250,000 cubic yards of beach-compatible material annually, which they are planning to dredge in November of this year and place in this area of the variance request. The HOA is also actively engaged in working with the Corps of Engineers for a supplemental EIS for the Rich's Inlet Long-Term Management Plan, including a 30-year nourishment permit similar to what the HOA had done for Mason's Inlet on the other end of the island. They're working with engineers Foth and Olson and Davy Group and TI Coastal. The HOA, through its consultants, also continue to do monitoring for the beach on the island. Beginning in December of this year, proposed infill, the HOA is planning to use the dredge deposits obtained from Nixon's Channel through the permit that they already have. The dredging project is expected to deposit 120 cubic yards of sand per linear foot in the area of the threatened properties. Based on different field measurements that field staff, DCM field staff have been taking throughout sort of this process, some of the average losses in one area of the stretch was approximately 123 feet of loss since January of 2023. In another place, it was about 98 feet of shoreline loss since January of 23. Petitioners came in to get the permits in the early part of last year and then the later part of last year. Of course, notice is provided to the adjacent riparian owners of these applications. DCM at the time did not receive any objections from these adjacent owners. Fact number 27 has sort of the table of all of the petitioners and the permits that were issued to them. Petitioners now are seeking a variance from the Commission's oceanfront erosion setback rules so that they can build sandbag structures no larger than 12 by 40, which is in excess of what's normally allowed by your rules. Also, for the two access ways, a variance is sought from one of your rules because there's no structure in the access way. So that's the end of the facts. On the 4 variance criteria, petitioners are, thank you. Petitioners are in agreement with, or excuse me, staff are in agreement with petitioners on the first, third, and fourth factors, but not the second. So the first factor, will unnecessary hardships result from strict application of the rules, standards, or orders of the Commission? Staff note that while there are no plans for a terminal groin at Richards Inlet, the HOA is pursuing other long-term responses to erosion, which is outlined in Mr. Kellum's email and in the affidavit provided by petitioners. Staff acknowledge that in this case, a strict application of the Commission's rules, which limit sandbag structure size, could cause the petitioners an unnecessary hardship, where the permitted 6 by 20 bags could be overtopped, as we saw, allowing damage to the existing houses and road right-of-ways. So we want to allow for them to protect those while they're pursuing these other longer-term management solutions. Factor 2 is the one we disagree on. Do the hardships result from conditions that are peculiar to the property, such as the location, size, or topography of the property? It looks like petitioner's position is largely that these are in an inlet hazard area and being impacted by the inlet. And staff disagrees that simply that proximity or inclusion within the IHA and also within the ocean erodible AEC is not the peculiarity that causes petitioner hardships. The fact that all of the lots are within an AEC, this AEC is designated because of its vulnerability, its acknowledgement of the vulnerability to erosion or other adverse effects of sand, wind, and water, as stated in your Rule 7H0301. And also that the Commission's rules note that, quote, the siting of development on and near these landforms shall be the subject of provisions in your rules to avoid their loss or damage. So we disagree on that one. Number 3, do the hardships result from actions taken by the petitioner? Staff agrees no. The accelerated erosion that appears to come in some cycles at this site is common in the ocean hazard and inlet areas and certainly isn't something petitioners caused. And then finally, the 4th factor is the requested variance consistent with the spirit, purpose, and intent of your rules, standards, or orders? Will it secure public safety and welfare, and will it preserve substantial justice? Staff agree that yes. The Commission's rules set out limitations for the use of sandbags, such as size limits and time limits, which are sufficient in most cases and are intended as a shorter-term erosion response only until a long-term response to protecting the structures can be implemented. and that has to be balanced with impacts to the use of the public trust areas and the oceanfront habitat. Staff agree that in this case, the larger structures will better protect the existing structures during this new erosion cycle on the north end, while the HOA pursues longer-term erosion responses. Staff also agree the variance would protect public safety and welfare, where the larger bags might better protect the existing roads right-of-way and structures and the access ways. It would also preserve substantial justice to allow the petitioners and the HOA more time to find a longer-term solution for the threatened structures in this area. I'll invite Charles to come up to argue his client's position, and then we'll be happy to take questions.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Christie. Good afternoon, Mr. Baldwin.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the Commission. I'm Charles Baldwin. I practice law in Wilmington at the Brooks Pierce Law Firm. I appreciate all the hard work of Christie and DCM staff to get us here for hearing on this agenda, given the imminent threat here. So it seems this is a textbook variance case. We have 21 imminently threatened resident structures where immediate sandbags are necessary, while other, in this particular case, short-term, mid-term, and long-term solutions are actually implemented by this very engaged community. With me today is Brian Stephanie, property owner at Inlet Hook, who was responsible for herding the cats and getting 22 people on board with this, and that was no small feat. But the fact they all agreed tells you how egregious and important this project is and necessary to protect these homes. Also with me today is Brandon Grimes, a marine contractor, who's going to expand, hopefully, in this revetment to make it effective. So if you have any technical questions, we'll be glad to answer. And y'all know David Kellum well, and he can be a resource as well. And just because all the properties are involved, you'll have a well-designed linear structure that will be effective here. So of the 4 factors, you heard great presentations on those. I'll focus on this. Well, actually, let me go through here. So here's what it looks like on the ground. This is the north end at Inlet Hook. And you can see the little green strip here. This is the HOA area. Then here's to the south of that at Comer. And here's the second HOA walkway in between 8 and 9 Comer Road. Here's the current condition. I took this picture myself. And these smaller existing sandbags are simply not working. These photos are from Dr. Bodge's affidavit. So let's look at the regulations. So this talks about the importance of the inlet hazard areas, and that these ocean hazard areas are critical because of the severity of the hazards and the intensity of the interest in the areas. So the management objective of these ocean hazard areas. The loss of life and property to these forces can be greatly reduced by the proper location and design of structures. That's why we referenced IHAs, because it's important. The regulations say it's important and point to proper management and location design of structures, as in this case. And the purpose, of course, is to minimize losses to life and property resulting from storms and long-term erosion. This is Dr. Bodge's affidavit. He says he's been at this for 39 years, has done it all over the world, and has worked with Figure 8 since 2017. This community has been very engaged and proactive. This talks about the background studies going back to the 1950s and all the information he's reviewed. This talks about this specific area while we're here today, this 1,875 feet along the shoreline from 5 Comer to 10 Inlet Hook. This is not a permanent condition. It occurs intermittently depending on Rich Inlet's location, the location of the main ebb tide channel. And importantly, this erosion would undercut the existing residential buildings if action is not taken immediately. More discussion about Rich Inlet, that it was in a good condition from 2014 to 2019, and unfavorable more recently from 2022 through 2024, leading to this instant erosion. The community was proactive, did a beach fill of 387,000 cubic yards. Unfortunately, the storms and so forth were insufficient to swing the needle all the way back to the good. He discusses the particular proposed project and why it's necessary. So the dimensions in his engineering opinion are, as he says, reasonable given the scope, magnitude, and immediacy of the observed conditions. He talks about the midterm and long-term strategies the community has permitted and is implementing. Sandbags, as you know, are intended to be short-term. That is the point here. So the Nixon Channel dredging coming up in November, December this year will occur. It's permitted. And also the adaptive inlet dredge management plan to stabilize the inlet and keep it in a good location, as was done for Mason's Inlet to the south. That's going through the EIS process and permitting. As was mentioned, that will be a 30-year plan. But it cannot address these immediate needs. That's why we're here today. So on the factors, there's agreement with staff on 3. On the second factor, do the hardships result from conditions peculiar to the properties? Absolutely. These homes are experiencing significant erosion caused by the episodic condition of Rich Inlet. The inlet conditions and proximity to Rich Inlet are peculiar. If you dive down technically into the affidavit, you can get as peculiar as you want to. Dr. Bodge goes into great detail in paragraphs 10 to 12 about the Rich Inlet processes and the result that it led to the eroded state of the shoreline that made it, quotes, highly susceptible to the high tides and seas of this fall. There is precedent in the 2003 variance order, which is a stipulated exhibit. It's at page 240 of your packet. The CRC found under a nearly identical factual record that the hardships faced by the lots, quotes, result from conditions peculiar to the project properties. That factor has already been found by this commission. Staff stated that simply being in an IHA or AEC is not unique. I agree with that general statement, but that ignores the basis of our position that these issues result from the contemporary conditions of Rich Inlet and its proximity as found by this commission in the 2003 order. Also peculiar in this case are the other short-term, mid-term, and long-term solutions actually being implemented. It would be a peculiar hardship not to protect these properties until these solutions can be had in the coming months and years. As Dr. Bodge noted, these sandbags are necessary until these solutions arrive. A lifeboat arriving too late is of no help. I'll be glad to answer any questions about the other factors. I think those are well explained by staff and in the materials you saw. And so for all these reasons, we respectfully request that the variances be granted. I'll be glad to answer any questions. Thank you very much for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Baldwin. Does anyone on the commission have any questions for either Christie or Mr. Baldwin? If not, is the commission prepared to act on this variance request? Criteria 1, will unnecessary hardships result from strict application of the rules, standards, or orders? And if so, petitioner must identify the unnecessary hardships. And on Criteria 1, both staff and petitioner said yes. Is there a motion?
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion that we accept both petitioner and staff's position of yes to criteria 1.
Motion's been made. Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Holman.
I'll second.
Any further discussion?
So to our Attorney General rep, I've had it drummed into my head over the years that a decision made on one variance request doesn't weigh on our decisions on a subsequent variance request. I see that in the petitioner's position, they have offered past decisions on other variances as part of their position. So my question is, would it be appropriate or helpful if the commission, if we were to adopt the petitioner's position on this criteria, to omit the reference to other variances? That's a question.
You are correct that you are sitting in a quasi-judicial proceeding, in a quasi-judicial posture during these hearings. And so each matter needs to be looked at on its own without referencing previous variances. And so if it is the wish of the will of the commission for me to omit anything when I'm drafting these orders regarding past variances, I am happy to do that, and I'll have to check the stipulated facts to see if that's included in there. But yes, that is correct. Everything you said is correct.
Thank you. And could I offer a friendly amendment to the motion on the floor? And that would be to omit the reference to other variances that have been considered.
Both the seconder and the motioner have indicated they'll accept the friendly amendment.
That would be my friendly amendment.
To omit the references to previous variances. If I'm not, that was your amendment, correct? Okay. Are you both okay with that? Okay. Vote on the motion as amended to exempt the previous references to variances. To vote on criteria 1 as amended, which is the motion on the floor. Any further discussion? Not? All in favor? All opposed? It is unanimous. Thank you. Criteria 2 is, do the hardships result from conditions that are peculiar to the property, such as the location, size, or topography of the property? And in this criteria 2, staff and petitioner do not agree. So entertain a motion on criteria 2.
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion that for criteria 2, we accept petitioner's position of yes, excluding references to prior variance approvals.
Is there a second? Commissioner Yates seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor? All opposed? It is unanimous. I'm sorry, excuse me. Pardon me, Lauren. One opposed. Commissioner Salter. Criteria 3, do the hardships result from actions taken by the petitioner? Both staff and petitioners agree on no. Is there a motion on criteria 3?
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion that for criteria 3, we accept petitioner and staff's position of no, and if there is any reference to prior variances, it be excluded.
Okay. Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Seconded by Commissioner Baldwin. Further discussion? All in favor? All opposed? It is unanimous, I believe, this time. Criteria 4, is the requested variance consistent with the spirit, purpose, and intent of the rules, standards, or orders, will secure public safety and welfare, will preserve substantial justice? And in this case, again, petitioner and staff agree as to the position of yes. Is there a motion on criteria 4?
Madam Chair, in reference to criteria 4, I make a motion we accept petitioner and staff's position of yes, and once again, excluding any prior variance approvals.
Okay, is there a second? seconded by Commissioner Holman. Further discussion? Sure, Steve, go ahead. There is a rule that says sandbags can exist for, and Tankard may have to help me, is it 8 years, I think? 8 years. But they never seem to go away. It is? Thank you very much. Anyone else? Not all in favor? All opposed? It is unanimous, and the variance requests are granted. Thank you. Yes, is Commissioner Hennessy around? We'll take a 5-minute break. How's that? How about that? Remind myself as well as any others, we need to speak loudly and clearly so Angela can pick it up and so the audience can hear us.
Yes, ma'am.
So Daniel, we're going to adjust the agenda just a little bit. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the commission. We did a presentation today regarding a petition for rulemaking we received last year. So we received a petition for rulemaking from Mr. Paul on November 12th of last year. Sarah notified Mr. Paul that his petition would be heard at this meeting. And so 15A NCAC 7J0605B requires that the director will prepare a recommended response to you regarding the petition. So the petition for rulemaking that was submitted was due to a session law 2025-48. The petitioner requests that the CRC rules be amended to align with the recent changes that this session law made to 113A 103 8A, B2, B5, and 113A 229. This thing's not. Sorry about that. So the session law made 3 statutory changes. It changed the CAMA 113A 103 by adding a new definition for man-made ditches. And CAMA 113A 113 for estuarine waters and public trust areas that were suggested as AECs. The commission did adopt through rulemaking. It also states that man-made ditches may not be designated as an AEC. And it also amended the dredge and fill law 113-229, stating that marshlands as defined may not include man-made ditches. So in order to address the session law, Mr. Paul has petitioned and requested the amendment be made to our rules, your rules, 15A NCAC 07H0106, by adding in a new language from CAMA verbatim, plus an additional sentence stating man-made ditches are not AECs. He also requests that amendments be made to 7A or 7H0205A coastal wetlands, and that coastal wetlands AEC adding language stating that coastal wetlands in a man-made ditch are not in the coastal wetland AEC. Third request was that for 7H0206A estuarine waters, that the states that man-made ditches are not estuarine waters. And lastly, 7H0207A public trust waters, he requests that it states the definition of a public trust area that excludes man-made ditches. So, we have looked at this petition, and it is our opinion that this petition violates the Administrative Procedures Act, and that the Administrative Procedures Act, APA, states that it can't be written verbatim. You can't take the law and put it verbatim into rule. You can take it and you can statutory cite it, or you can rewrite it, but you can't. And the petitioner verbatim put in the rule exactly what the law stated. So staff has come up with a different way to approach this, and it would not be verbatim. And so here's some examples of possible rulemaking that we could consider. This would be basically for 7H01066. We would determine man-made ditches would be defined in General Statute 113A. So we're not going in verbatim and rewriting the law and the rule. And then for 7H coastal wetlands, under the definition section, we would just add man-made ditches as defined in 15A NCAC 7H01066 are excluded from the coastal wetland AEC. And then lastly, for public trust areas, we would add a sentence saying except man-made ditches as defined in 7H01066. So it is our recommendation, and it's the director's recommendation, to grant Mr. Paul's petition, but not to endorse his wording, because due to the APA requirements. So staff's requesting for you to move forward with rulemaking using staff's requests and staff's proposed amendments. And I'll happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Daniel. Questions for Daniel? Larry?
Daniel, in this .0207, I was never an English major and definitely not a lawyer. But the way this rule that's being proposed here, I remember that commas versus semicolons versus colons make a huge difference, especially when you're around attorneys. And the way this is written, it sounds like the except man-made ditches is only for all waters, artificial bodies, public fishing resources, rather than being inclusive of the other semicolon or listed things up there. And so that was what my concerns, the way,
Speak up a little bit.
the way that's written.
Yeah, I'll take that into consideration and get back to you.
Because I did pull up the session law. I don't know where that came from, but it sounded pretty inclusive, I mean, of everything as far as ditches. That they wanted that to be taken out of AECs according to the session law. But I'll turn that over to the attorneys to discuss on that, on the proper wording, or if that may be correct there.
Okay. Did everybody get that? To take a look at that? Robbie? That's the result of what it would be.
That's correct.
So, any other questions? If not, Jordan?
Is Mr. Paul here?
He is not at this time. We have accepted his position for rulemaking, and any action we take today would be subject to all public comments and so forth as well.
And Madam Chair, that is just what I wanted to remind the commission. The action before this commission is just to grant this petition for rulemaking for these rules. You are not committed necessarily to this language in any way. It is just to start the process for these rules based on Mr. Paul's request,
It would
if
have to
that's
come
the
back.
way that the commission would like to proceed.
Anything further would have to come back to us before we send it to public comment. Jordan?
Follow up. So there was a few other items in that session law too that were to be addressed. Upland basins, what's the status of proceeding with those items for rulemaking?
So that'll come to you in a future. So the Upland Basin specifically deals with DEQ rulemaking, so it's not just this commission, it's also going to be EMC. So there's some coordination that has to happen between us and DWR to make sure that we're on the same page and those are being written the way that responsive legislation for the entire DEQ, because that's how the bill's written.
Just point of clarity, so in absence of rule, if a applicant comes, we're following the law.
We are following the law. We have 2 of those Upland Basin permits in the House right now, so we're doing it that way.
Does the commission wish to deny or accept the petition for rulemaking? A motion would be needed. Jordan?
I make a motion to accept and to proceed with rulemaking. Is that correct?
For man-made
Yep.
ditches.
For man-made ditches, yes.
I'll second that.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor? All opposed? So moved. Move this forward. Daniel?
Yes, ma'am.
For clarity, not endorsing that particular language, but to work on it. Yep.
Work on it and bring it back. We don't want to violate anything that's already in the APA.
So this is a follow-up to our periodic review process. This was presented to you last time, back in August of 2025. But basically, prior to 2013, your rules did not expire. And the 150B-2113A now requires a 10-year review of all your rules. And at that time, it is up to the commission to decide whether or not these rules are unnecessary. And unnecessary is one determined by an agency to be absolute, redundant, or otherwise no longer required. And if the rule is deemed unnecessary, it will expire. So the first step of this process was for you to determine whether or not the rules that were submitted to us by OH, that would be 7A, 7H, 7I, 7J, 7K, 7L, and 7M, and I'll go through what those are later. Was the first step was to decide whether or not those rules were necessary or unnecessary, and at your August 2025 meeting, you approved that these rules were necessary. So at that time, we submitted it out for public comment. There was no public comments received, correct, Angela? And so now the final next step is for you to make a final determination on whether or not these rules of necessary, unnecessary, of 15A, NCAC 078, which is our organization and duties, 7H, which is our state guidelines for AECs, 7I for grant criteria for procedures for local implementation and enforcement, 7J, procedures for processing and enforcement of major and minor development permits, variances, appeals, and permit decisions, declaratory rules and static line, 7K, activities in the AEC which do not require a permit, 7L, local planning and management grants, 7M, general policy guidelines. At that point in time, if you deem that these are all necessary, we'll then submit the report to OOH in June, and then the report will become effective 61 days earlier from the Joint Legislative Administrative Procedures Oversight Committee. And so with that, staff is asking for these rules to be either necessary or unnecessary.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Jordan?
So, are these rules that have been previously adopted by Rules Review Commission?
At one time.
Okay. Were there any changes to any of these rules?
No.
Okay.
Any other questions? If not, motion will be needed to approve the final classification report. Motion by Commissioner Emery, second by Commissioner Holman. Any further discussion? All in favor? All opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you.
Next up, good afternoon, Dr. Moore. It's good to see you. The floor is yours. Oceanfront hardened structures discussion. Thank you very much for your science panel work once again, and for taking on another task. We appreciate it.
Ken, is there a way to shrink that down, or that's probably already come up and we're stuck with that? Might be helpful if we can. Oh, great. That's helpful, thank you.
Good
Well,
afternoon.
good afternoon, Commissioners, Chair, others. Glad to be back to share with you the outline that the panel put together following the last meeting with you, where we offered to provide some insights on the effects of structures, as I know they're becoming more and more of interest, given some of the very severe erosional concerns that have been only worsening. So we prepared an outline at your request and are seeking your feedback and are ready to move forward with a preparation of a report to share with you. The general structure is, I have more slides to get into the details, but just to lay out the general outline, we'll start with an introduction that includes information we think is very important to understanding the details that will follow. The second section will be the meat of the report, and here we will be focusing on the effects of structures. We've broken this into two categories according to how these erosion management measures function. Essentially, all erosion management approaches fall into two categories. One is structures or approaches that trap sand, and the second is structures that really harden the shoreline. And so we are proposing to break the report, section 2, into those categories and then address the different structures that commonly fall in that category. The third is lessons learned. And so this won't be exhaustive because there are many, many examples that could be drawn from, but we thought that a few examples that illustrate the points that we make in section 2 might be very useful. So we're proposing some key lessons learned. So a little more detail, and I know you all have a copy of this, but just to highlight for you, in the introduction, we would like to provide a high-level overview of shoreline change and barrier island dynamics. Talk a little bit about how barrier island coastlines are a special case. So much of our coastline, of course, is comprised of barrier islands, and they really are a landform that functions in ways that it's important to keep in mind as we think about the effects of structures. So we'd like to describe that in a straightforward way. That will include a review of alongshore and cross-shore processes, some of which we've shared with you in the context of the Inlet Hazard Area Report, but to put them here in this report we think would be helpful. This will get at sort of the long-term evolution and change of our barrier island landscape and talk also about the short-term impacts of storms and other high water events that we are witnessing creating such significant change on our coastline. Then we'd like to spend a little time talking specifically about the North Carolina coastline and just set the context for this open ocean, high energy coastline with a lot of sand moving along shore, the inlets and barrier islands, again, specific to North Carolina. So the overview would be a little more generalized, but the second section B here would be really zooming in on the North Carolina coastline. Talk a little bit about the rates of shoreline change, how they're measured, monitored, why they vary along shore, factors like shoreline shape change and sources and sinks of sand and how those affect where the shoreline is eroding versus where it's growing. Again, some of this has come up in the context of the IHA report. Talk a little bit about the erosion hotspots, why they are occurring, where they are, and then present those. And then we'd like to put forward just the general categories of erosion management approaches. The last two are what we'll really focus on in section 2, but here just the general approaches in the literature and across coastal management practices, you all know, is to either avoid the problem, so we do a lot of this with the setback rules that you manage and keep in place, the possibility for relocating critical infrastructure that's at high risk. Those all fall under the avoid the problem approach. You can plant grasses or use fences to trap sand in a way that's relatively natural. Of course, we add sand through nourishment, construction of dunes, and then the last two, really trapping sand using structures and hardening the shoreline, which will be the main focus of section 2, as I've said. We thought it would also be useful to provide a brief overview of what's currently allowed and being used in North Carolina. And then the last section would just point toward some of the challenges that are involved in reducing erosion in one place. And I think here what's really important is to put forward that there really isn't, we talk about solutions, but there really isn't a solution to a lot of the challenges that we're facing. There are approaches and strategies that can either shift the erosion problem to another adjacent location, or there, in some cases, we can slow the problem down. We can create more time to make perhaps bigger adjustments that are likely to be needed going forward. And so in this section, we'll point to some of the trade-offs that really are inherent in choosing an erosion management approach. So we'll talk about those, sort of the brief overview of the types of physical effects that come about from trapping sand and hardening the shoreline. And we also want to point toward the difference between the high energy open ocean coastline versus our estuarine shorelines, because the solutions are very different necessarily, because the energy that is brought to the coastline is very different. And so although oftentimes we might think, oh, well, can we just build a living shoreline? I mean, that's only for estuarine shorelines or very low energy ocean coastlines, which are not the one kind of coastline we're dealing with here. And then we also do want to acknowledge the ecological impacts. This won't be as exhaustive as the others, but we do have a member of our panel who is well versed in this category, so we'd like to at least point towards some of the trade-offs in that arena as well. And then for section 2, this is where we'll really talk about the effects of structures. And again, breaking this into structures that trap sand versus structures that harden the shoreline. And here for each category, we will talk about the intended purpose of the structure. So is it to reduce wave energy? Is it to actually trap sand? Each of these structures has a slightly different goal in terms of how it's designed to work. Talk about the physical effects, and then again, we'll point toward some of the potential ecological impacts that are known to typically occur, and also point to the trade-offs that really are important to consider when selecting, or that are involved in selecting these approaches. So jetties, these are not, of course, intended to reduce erosion, but we included them here because they do trap sand, and they do change the distribution of where erosion and accretion occurs. So we thought we would start with a brief discussion there. Groins, and again, there are traditional designs, those that are leaky, and then there are also terminal groins, which are a special case, as you know. So we would distinguish between those two. And then offshore breakwaters and wave attenuators, another category that we can discuss. And essentially, all of these essentially lead to trapping sand in one location, which means that it's not reaching an adjacent location. And so, again, really an eye toward the trade-offs that are involved. And then with hardening, you'll notice 3 categories of seawalls. There are many different types of seawalls, as you know: concrete, revetments, and riprap made up of large pieces of stone or other materials. And then we also, you'll notice, included sandbags and geotextile tubes here. And that's because sandbags essentially are seawalls. They're just considered temporary because they're made of sand and they can disintegrate over time. I believe they're supposed to also be removed, but we know that doesn't generally happen. So essentially, sandbags are another type of seawall. And you'll note that we put here that size is really important. And so I know that's the topic of discussion before the CRC currently. I will share that there's concern among the panel members that there be real clear awareness of the trade-offs associated with increasing the size, especially the height of sandbags, because when you go above 6 feet, especially along a barrier island coastline, there are some pretty significant trade-offs that are at least worthwhile to be aware of in making that choice. Because when we do not allow some sand to make it to the island interior, we're looking at flooding and inundation from the sound side occurring much sooner. And of course, that's tricky, right? Because whenever sand lands on our roads, it's really difficult. And yet, sometimes some of that sand also makes it to the marsh or the landscape behind the road, and that's really important to preventing impacts to the road from the sound side, which are forthcoming, and we've already started to see that in some places. And then our third category, oops, I guess I don't, it's already up there, lessons learned. And if you have particular examples that you'd like us to speak to, we can certainly consider that. Again, we're not trying to be extremely exhaustive here. There are hundreds, maybe thousands of erosion control products that folks would say might solve all your problems without concern. Some certainly do talk clearly about these trade-offs. We can't cover them all, but by breaking them into these 2 categories, if there are particular measures that you would like to consider, we can certainly speak to which category they fall in, and then the physical effects are essentially very similar. So that's what I have to share. We're happy for any comments, requests, a go forth, whatever discussion you'd like to have, I'm here to support.
Thank you, Dr. Moore, appreciate it. Questions by commissioners? Larry?
Thank you for your time. I did watch your old science panel meeting, and I do appreciate everybody's time and effort in this. It was good discussion during that meeting.
Thank you.
One of the things, well, there's 2 things. One is that I didn't quite see explicitly stated is our shorelines. Some are north-south, other shorelines are sort of east-west facing.
Sure.
And it seems like the north-south ones are the ones that really have a lot of, or more prone to the severe erosion, especially around inlets. But that's one thing, is to try to, as far as an inventory.
Sure, we can speak to the effects of shoreline orientation on these processes, and that would be something we can do.
The second thing was, and I'm glad to see the structures that trap sand, which I know, one of the things with these reef balls, I was looking at several things after y'all's panel discussion, and the Australian Gold Coast, they've used that to create an offshore berm, and the Cayman Islands have done that, and the success of those projects were dramatic, not only as far as trapping sand, but also it created a wonderful habitat of fish and actually seaweed on a lot of places. But that seemed to have a lot of promise and may be a good fit for where we try to go in the future on this. But the problem is evident. Mr. Alton back there is almost becoming a news anchor on television, but he would like to see a solution for it. The variance we had this morning, we do need alternatives to try to work with this rather than just sandbags. But I do appreciate y'all's time on this.
Sure, and we can look at the reef ball examples. I will say, I mean, they, I'm sure, function similar to breakwaters, and so again, it's a trapping sand function, which means, you know, you just want to be aware if you're trapping sand in one place, that means it's not getting somewhere else. And
Well,
so.
and it's like most things, people sell you anything, but does it work? And,
Right, and does it work for this coastline? Because the challenge is we have such long stretches of open ocean coastline that are necessarily connected. And, you know, how you approach reducing the rate of erosion in a way that doesn't cause a problem farther downdrift is a challenge for a coastline such as ours. So appreciate your comments, and we'll take those into account.
Other questions? Neil?
I just want to make a comment that I think this outline has us headed in the right direction, so appreciate you and your panel's efforts on this. Thank you.
Great, you're welcome, glad to hear.
Bob?
Like Larry, I listened in to the discussion and was really, I was amazed at how quickly you all came to an outline. I was impressed by that. Also wondering, channel relocation, that sort of thing around inlets, is that something that might be looked at? I've seen, we have had some cases here in North Carolina where that seemed to help in some of our inlet locations.
Locally, that can make a difference. We've seen that in some of the specific instances I can think of. It probably, that we'd have to think about how far-reaching those effects might be, but we can include that in our conversations for sure. Thank you.
Other questions? Jordan?
All your time, because I know you're volunteering as well as everybody else, and that's, I mean, that's really something to be thankful for.
Appreciate that.
Timeline, would want to hear a little bit what you think
Right.
that would be. And I mentioned this before, but economics, I know that's not necessarily in the science panel's wheelhouse, but it's something I think is an important component to be looked at, is the economic impact that these coastal communities have to the state, as well as also the costs of some of these.
You're talking about cost benefit, essentially.
Correct.
Yeah.
And, I mean, I remember looking at a stat of how many people that own property on the coast that actually live in other counties in the state west of I-95, and it's substantial. And
Brilliant.
it's a good figure to have to try to advocate, because it's whatever that's going to come to this is going to be pricey. So it's going to need money to be able to help with the fix.
Well, I think that, if I may.
Please.
I think some of the coastal communities have a database that shows where all of their property owners are from, and that's something that they could do, not necessarily the science panel.
Right. I wasn't saying for them to do that. I was just using that as an
But
example.
it's something that they could communicate to their out-of-town property owners
Right,
and advocate
right.
for. I mean, some of the northern, west of I-95 is like Morehead City South. The northern counties are,
West of Raleigh's
Yeah, the northern counties, we're a subsidiary of Richmond
Right,
and
right.
Virginia. So
Right.
there's quite a different clientele,
Difference.
but, that's something that I think most towns and communities have looked at over the course of time as they've advocated for different beach nourishment projects and so forth. So that's something that everybody's pretty familiar with, I think.
Well, and something we might be able to comment on in a brief manner, I could float this with the panel, is what information would be needed to consider a cost-benefit analysis in a comprehensive way. And if we just lay out some of the components, which many of you are aware of, but if they're in there written down in a way that might then support communities in beginning to gather that information, we could potentially provide a paragraph or based on the cost-benefit analyses we've seen done before.
That's good.
Follow-up. So I think there was a professor at UNCW, Chris Dumas,
Yes.
very knowledgeable, very resourceful to pull from. I don't know if he'd be interested in helping. Also, it could be something if there's a dollar amount that might need to be needed to help with this study, to be able to.
To bring in someone.
To put some touches on it, I think could be something entertaining. I know that it might not be something that DCM has resources, but it could be something that asks of the state or other local counties or communities to help contribute to pay
As they move
towards.
forward, that would be something to consider.
Be a
Absolutely.
companion
Yeah.
document.
As more information comes out forward, then those are things to consider to go along with it.
I think that's a very good idea.
And then just last thing is timeline. What you
Yeah, well, we talked about a sense that we could probably have this done by May. I know your next meeting is in April. With academic timelines, that's probably challenging.
Well, and we also tentatively have meetings scheduled for June. We don't always have it, but we can have a June meeting
Okay.
as well.
I think June is very doable. I would love to say by your next meeting, because I know you have things before you that might benefit from this, but I think given the volunteer nature of the panel and the academic semester timeline, April is a challenging. As we get to the end of April, we have a little more breathing room, so we can make progress up to there, but to finish it off, I think we could certainly aim for May, and then it would be ready for your June meeting.
And it may
I mean,
be, and it may be that our June meeting would be for this discussion. Is everybody comfortable with the structure that was presented by Dr. Moore? I think you've done an awful lot of work. The science panel's done a great job. Me, I'm technology challenged. I could never get into the meeting that instant.
Well, I understand.
But that's
Well,
okay.
You're welcome, and we're glad to provide insight that we hope will be helpful as you move forward.
Any other comments about the structure that was presented to us? And everybody seems to be, I'm hearing no dissension about not being
Okay.
comfortable.
Well, and if anything else comes forward, just reach out, and we will entertain your requests happily.
And if you have any requests for us as you move forward, please let us know.
Okay.
If you need to have any other people that you want to bring into it, we're glad to always work with you to do so.
I appreciate that, and I would say if you can pass along information about the person that you mentioned, maybe we can take a look at the literature at least coming out of that group and perhaps connect in.
Dr. Dumas has made some presentations long time past.
Is that something
Okay.
Tank?
We can
Yep.
follow up, yep.
Yeah, okay.
He's done some work that we've seen before.
We can look into that.
Yeah.
Great. All right, well, thank you.
Thank you very much, appreciate it. And thank you again to the members of the Science Panel. I know everybody's volunteering their time, but it is really important to us as we move forward with decision-making.
Well, we appreciate the opportunity and are honored to serve.
Thank you.
I'll pass it along. Thank you.
Do I need a motion on that, or can I just? I think we need a motion to adopt the charge that was presented to us today.
I'll make that motion, and just to add for for Dr. Moore and the science panel to put thought into a cost-benefit analysis too.
Is there as well as perhaps the June deadline?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is the charge, I don't know if I've seen the charge as written, is it?
It's your outline.
Oh, the outline is
Your
the
outline-
charge.
Your outline is the
Great.
charge.
Okay, I wasn't sure if there was other wording. That's
No,
perfect.
ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you. There's been a motion. Is there a second? Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? DR? Speak a little bit closer. Thank you.
I believe the wording was look into, or what did you say, give thought to?
Put thought, yeah.
Put thought into. So certainly we can have a conversation, and I appreciate that. I do want to make it clear that we won't be able to do a cost-benefit analysis, but we can certainly comment on the value of one and what might go into one and point toward resources. So as long as that meets the spirit of the wording that you put forward, I'm comfortable.
Sheila?
I just wanted to make sure that some of the other comments would be included, like Larry's suggestion of shoreline orientation, the work that's being done on the Australian Gold Coast, and then Bob's discussion about the relocations.
What was the last one?
Commissioner Emery's comment about the relocations of inlets.
Right. I did make note of those points, and we can insert them, so appreciate that. Yeah.
I'll amend my motion to add those items that Sheila just mentioned and for thought to be put to those two.
And the seconder's okay with that?
Seconder's okay with that.
All right. All in favor of the motion as amended? Motion is unanimous. Thank you. And once again, Dr. Moore, thank you. Do we have anything else we need up today?
So you've got to wait for the public hearing.
Right, we do.
We can bring up the
Right,
fee
Rachel's.
increases.
How about Rachel's?
That's what we,
Yeah. Oh, that's right. Okay. What would you like to bring up?
we can bring up the fee increases. Cameron?
Cameron? Where is Cameron?
Please.
Yes, are you prepared to let's move up from tomorrow's agenda to today's agenda? Good afternoon, Cam.
Good afternoon. Give me a second to find this.
Take your time. We're just rearranging the agenda. We're going to go to the second day. We're going to do.
Okay. Afternoon. You guys ready? Wait.
Yes, we are.
Cool. Afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the commission. My name's Cameron Luck. I'm here to present, I have the title Proposed Amendments for Major, Minor, and General Permit Fee Increases. Those also include transfers, renewals, and modifications. As you may be aware, let me go ahead and jump ahead real quick. As you may be aware of the General Statute 143B 279.19 was passed last year. It's a struggle with this word, quadrennial adjustment of certain fees and rates. This general statute that was passed essentially provided a list of existing general statutes associated with fees and essentially proposed a 4-year change to your fees based on the Consumer Price Index. As you can see, number 5 on that list, 113A-119.1 is a section of CAMA, and that section specifically references the language in CAMA that caps your permit fees to $400. This information, or the department took this information and has published those fees on the website for increases to all the existing fees in your rules. But essentially, this is overriding that cap, and so a lot of your fees have jumped up above that $400. Again, this is happening every 4 years, and that calculation, the Consumer Price Index calculation, is being done by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Cool. So part of the general statute included an exemption for rulemaking. So there was a question posed of, well, why do we need to bring this information before you guys if it's exempt from rulemaking? The answer to that is because the CRC rules contain numerical fees within them. And so those fees, as are currently written in rule, need to be updated to reflect what the new numbers are according to the Consumer Price Index. So I've tried to list out all the fees here. As you may have been aware, you would have received an updated memo fairly recently. That included something that we missed in the previous memo, which was the modification fees and the renewal and transfer fees. It's not a massive increase across the fees, but it is an increase, and as you can see in several cases, it exceeds that cap from CAMA, but as a result of that general statute, we're able to now do that. So it's also worth mentioning that this is going to happen every 4 years. So based on the rule language that I'll roll through shortly that provides language showing these changes, you could expect us to come back every 4 years to represent the updates. And we'll talk about that as a potential option, but I'll offer maybe 2 other options to potentially streamline this process so we don't have to revisit you guys every few years. So first is the major and minor permit fees. As you can see, there's the language showing the changes being made and the increases in line. That's a 204. In our general permits, so there's actually quite a few. Every single one of the general permits will increase. I showed 2 examples here. The 07H 1103 is your riprap, revetment, and bulkheads. It's sort of unique how it's written under permit fees. All of your other general permits reflect the structure that is in the bottom one, which is 07H 1203. Your permit modifications, transfers, and renewals. This is what the language would look like. Simple strike through, changing language where needed, and updating the numbers. And before I get to questions, bear with me. So right now, staff is showing you inline changes that could be made to your rules. The process moving forward would essentially be looking for approval from the commission because this is exempt from rulemaking and also from General Statute 12-3.1, I believe, which is the general statute associated with the process for changing your fees. That new general statute that I initially showed you and provided an attachment for overrides the language in that as well and lays out the process for getting those fees updated. If we were to proceed with just this language, we would look for approval from the commission, and then that language would be submitted in the 0400 forms. This is as we understand it currently. We submitted in the 0400 forms to OAH, checking a box stating that this rulemaking is exempt from the RSC. We would cite the general statute, and then it would move on to the codifier. An alternative to this would potentially be to create a new rule that references the Consumer Price Index or the department's website where the fees are currently being hosted per the most recent general statute. In doing so, we would actually remove language, like for an example being what you see here, these sections of rule that currently host the permit fee information. So that would essentially take all your permit fees and bring them to one singular rule, which would be a new rule. And that would either include all of the numbers, and so we would only update that one rule, or potentially just reference the department website. And then the third option would take the mention of permit fees out of the rule altogether, and we would rely entirely on the department's website. There's pros and cons to those options. I'll offer one, which is it can be helpful to have the numerical information in rule. It's something that's easy to point to. But from a streamlined approach, there's some of the alternatives that I've presented. So staff has prepared this for you all, but if the commission would like to proceed in the other two avenues, we're happy to go create that language for you. I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Cam. Questions for Cam?
Madam Chair, my personal preference would be to keep the dollar amounts in the rule language, just to make it simpler and easier for citizens, engineers, consultants to get the information more readily than having to be pointed to, a different site, et cetera. And sometimes those references to different sites get broken, get changed, get moved, and you go to a link that no longer has that information. So to me, the more succinct and readily available, the better.
Lauren?
Do you think that you could anticipate?
Lauren, can you speak a little bit louder?
Do you think that you could anticipate the changes ahead of time so that your rules wouldn't be lagging to that change? Because a rule takes sometimes 18 months to become effective.
This would be much faster because we don't have to go through the fiscal analysis, the public hearing, because effectively these rules, the fees are being applied. The department, as part of that general statute, there was requirements by the department to go ahead and move these updates through a process and post them on the website. So this is sort of secondary to your standard rulemaking, so this would be much, much faster. We worked with our rulemaking coordinator on this to sort of talk through this process. Obviously, this would be the first time we've done it, so getting it codified is, once we get through that the first time, we'll know exactly how long this takes. But, yeah.
Other questions? Jordan?
Can you just confirm what the rate increase was?
Oh, off the top of my head.
I think if I went back, because it's because you went from 100 to 119, but I think it was 18 something.
Yes, between 18 and 19%.
What direction would the commission like to take based on Cam's presentation?
Madam Chair?
Sure.
Cameron, I apologize, but would you go through the three options one more time? I thought I was following you, but I think I missed one of them.
Yeah, so of course the first option is to go with what we've presented, which is just the strike-through updates, update the language as presented. That one's the most logical pathway forwards, just based on what we have. The second option is actually to remove the permit fee language as it's located throughout our rules, because it's, as you can see, it's buried throughout a variety of different rules, and actually generate a new piece of rule language that specifically talks to permit fees and then references either the department's website or some other maybe more stable mechanism or stable location, potentially even citing the consumer price index. That's something we would have to figure out. And then that rule itself just gives some reference to fees and the permit fees associated with your permits in your rules. And then the third option is, because these fee changes and calculations are happening external of the commission, they will be updated according to that general statute every 4 years. And so theoretically, you could just take fees out of your rules altogether.
Jordan? Wait a minute, sorry. She'll follow up.
I just wanted to ask a follow-up. And so if we leave the specific amount in 4 years, does the change come back to the CRC, or does you all just make that happen? And
No, because they're your rules, and it certainly doesn't qualify as a technical change. This is something we would we would want at least, part of what we're doing here is actually creating a historic note of what's happening in a record. So anytime we do changes to your rule, we want to make sure we bring them back to you for your approval. And so we would always need to do that.
Sheila, any thought?
I apologize, another follow-up. But if this is in state law, what ability does the CRC have to change the fee? So, I mean, it seems like if you brought it back as an informational item, but not an action item. I don't know.
Prior to the law, the commission set the fee, right? The law's changed, now it's going to change every 4 years. So instead of having to change the rule every 4 years, I think we should just try to find a way to, where it's done internally.
Robbie?
I would have to agree with Jordan on that. We are a non-competitive entity. The people don't have a choice whether they get to pay or shop us and get their permit somewhere else. It should make perfectly good sense to them that there should be a form, I mean, an exact process or procedure on what generates the prices based on inflation, cost of living, that kind of stuff, because that money's required to pay the staff. And I think that's where we generate the income to pay the staff. It would seem to me that the legislature would understand that we needed to make a rule that was a permanent rule, that our rates go up at a figure of 3% a year or 5% a year or whatever, you know, to have just a standard statute rather than having to revisit this thing every 4 years. That just makes more sense to me. But of course, I know that's not how legislature works. To make a rule like that, to ask legislature to approve something of that type?
I'm not sure I completely followed you on that.
I guess my biggest question is, you want us to make a motion to approve 1, 2, or 3 today?
So, yeah, so we have, this is sort of a new thing. Typically, you go through the rulemaking process. We're all very familiar with that. We went ahead and did the standard strike-through sort of status quo, keeping the language in your rules as a convenience to contractors, et cetera, to keep that language in there. We have no say over what that number is going to be because it's going to change every 4 years sort of externally of us, but we keep that language in there to reflect what is happening through the Consumer Price Index. Along those lines, staff discussed ways to streamline that and talked about what you all have brought up about, well, we don't actually have a say in those numbers. And so part of this presentation was also including making you aware that we have considered those other options and wanted to put those in front of the commission for y'all's consideration to request that we go back and do that.
Tancred?
I think it's important to keep in mind that the commission has the authority under CAMA to set a maximum fee. And so as CAMA presented, not all of your fees are at that maximum. So what this statute does is it adds a CPI adjustment every 4 years, but it doesn't take away your authority to set fees within and under that cap. So, for example, your minor permit fee, you still have the authority to change that fee, or other fees that aren't at the maximum. So I would keep that in mind as you think about what authority you have or don't have. It's not that they're dictating what your fees are, it's just they're giving you a CPI on top of your existing fees.
Mr. Secretary, I'd have to agree with that. That makes perfectly good sense to me because things may change in the staff. We may decide we need somebody else or more. So it just makes sense to me that those things happen. Would it be reasonable for me to make the motion to approve his proposal number 1?
1 second before you do that.
Couple things. So would they take every 4 years, whatever the rate is on that 4th year, and increase it by what the consumer?
Correct.
Okay. I think there's a way to keep the dollar amount in the fee in the rule, along with an automatic increase once that 4 year comes around. That whatever that percentage is, whatever the dollar amount is, rounded up, will be put, updated into the rule. That won't require us to do that every 4 years, or, I mean, it was clear that the legislature was, that this was not to be, to rulemaking. It was exempt from the rulemaking process.
Right, but to remain codified, it still takes this commission to act so that the changes can be made to the codifier. If you want to keep the dollar amounts in the rules, those have to go through the process of the commission approving that change, then go to codifier rules.
I hadn't forgotten you, Robbie. Steve? Go ahead, Steve.
I'm fine with option number one and keeping the dollar amount in there. I think the commission would have the option in the future to approve a CPI increase or change that CPI increase, depending. It says it's capped.
You would have the option to go below. It is going to automatically adjust the existing based on the CPI. So
And that might be a shocker to some, but sometimes I'd like to see government go lower.
And that's an option you have. Or if other rules aren't at the cap, you can go higher.
Robbie, now you can make your...
Sticking with the resolution, I'd like to move that we approve his option number one.
Is there a second to that? DR seconded. Any further discussion? Lauren?
How does RRC play into this?
So it's exempt from the standard rulemaking process, so we submit directly to OAH. I might ask Sarah to weigh in on this a little bit. Our understanding is we will have Angela fill out the 0400 forms. There's a box that checks RC exemption. You need to cite a general statute as part of that. That form is submitted directly to OAH and theoretically goes straight to the codifier.
And we're in the process of getting clarification to make sure that's correct.
Yeah.
And that is, based on my knowledge of it, that is the process, that when there's a statute, there's an exemption to large parts of the process. Again, it still has to be adopted by all of you, but then it goes right to the codifier.
I just have a question. I've heard this referred to as the maximum permit fee, but I'm looking at, maybe I'm just looking at the wrong part of the rule, but I don't see, all I see is that the permit fee is X number of dollars. I don't see that that's a maximum.
The maximum is in CAMA.
So important to add real quick, may I chime in real quick? So it's important to add that part of the process under Section C of that general statute includes, the last thing is the department shall notify the reviser of statutes, shall adjust the amounts in statute. So currently, we're checking in on that to see where the department is in that process. CAMA, under the highlighted, I'll have it up right now, but the highlighted number 5 under that general statute is that section in CAMA 113A-119.1, and that's where it has a cap where it specifies $400. So we're under the impression that that number will increase through the reviser of statutes to whatever the ceiling is for the CPI.
Any other questions? No? Larry?
Since we beat this horse to death, it's, I'd just like to add in the language, I think it said payment by check or money order. I think y'all take online payments now. So that language, I mean, to expand that to cover all in any kind of payment in the rule, if we're going to put it in the rule.
Noted.
DR? A little louder.
I'm not an English major nor an attorney.
Okay. All in favor? All opposed? It is unanimous. Okay. Next up, Since we have a public hearing at 4 o'clock, we just can't adjourn. So, next up is consideration of adoption of 15A NCAC 07H.2300, general permit for replacement of existing bridges and culverts. Greg?
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the commission. If you give me a second, I will find my presentation. And there it is. There we go. And again, afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the commission. Again, for the record, my name is Greg Bodner. I'm the major permit coordinator for the division. And I'm here to give you an update on 15A NCAC 07H.2300 after our public comment. So recently, since the August 2025 meeting, DCM published the public comment period in the NC Register in the beginning of October. The comment period ran from October 1st to December 1st. No comments were submitted for that comment period. And also DCM conducted a public hearing at the headquarters in Morehead City on the 20th of October, and there was no public attendance. So just to give you a quick review of what those changes were, they're here highlighted. Basically, there were some non-substantive changes to the wording and formatting there in subsection B, talking about and identifying the project narrative as one of the things required in an application, and also clarifying the applicant's name and address is required, and identifying dated plats being shown for the existing and proposed development. Within the other, in section B, just kind of identifying a little bit who the adjacent riparian property owners are. The riparian wasn't in there previously, so just making some clarification changes for the remainder of subsection B. And then in subsection C was where kind of the meat of the changes and corrections were. If you remember previously, during review and updates to 2302, inadvertently had changed back to what almost all of our other GPs were for an expiration date. This one was a little bit unique for the other general permits in the fact that it was previously a 2-year expiration date, and that obviously is because for the division or for DOT, for them to be able to let a project get it built, obviously was not able to be done in the amount of time that our normal general permits were. So we were reverting back to those 2-year expiration date. And then just kind of further clarifying that the approval will be provided for these projects by the Division of Coastal Management to the applicant via a general permit. So next steps we have here, happy to take any questions. This is pretty quick and self-explanatory, so we're happy to take any questions about where we are in the process after the comment period for bridges and culverts.
Jordan?
So this is a 2 years, what was it before?
It was previously 2 years. When it went through periodic rule review, it was inadvertently changed to, I believe it was 120 days, which is almost all of our other general permits. So we are here to go ahead and correct that back to the original 2-year expiration date.
Any other questions? If not, a motion will be needed to adopt amendments to 7H.2302.
So moved.
Is there a second? Multiple seconds. Any discussion? All in favor? All opposed? Angela, if you need specifics, Baldwin, Salter, Holman for seconds. Thank you, Greg.
Thank you, ma'am.
Sarah, are you ready to do some legal updates?
Happy.
Go right ahead.
I believe on or around March 9th, or I'm sorry, February 9th, I'm jumping ahead. I sent you all a legal update that has a summary of the cases the commission is involved in currently. I did have 2 very brief updates since then. for those two Court of Appeals cases at the top, the CRC, the RRC. The RRC has filed its reply brief. An amicus brief was also filed on that matter, and the RRC has time to reply to that amicus brief. On the Reedy matter, we did file the brief on behalf of the CRC, not this Monday, but the previous Monday. And so other than that, we've had recently several third-party hearing requests come in since this legal update was done, 5. And so with this and the 20-plus variances you all just approved a little bit ago, that will be most of your next legal update. But I'm happy to answer any questions anyone has.
Questions? Larry?
The amicus filings, can you say which way they were leaning on that?
I can tell you who it was from.
Oh, that's excellent.
Who filed the amicus? The amicus was from the North Carolina Coastal Federation. And again, I know Mary used to send you everything and have many attachments. I don't know how useful that was to all of you, but if there are any particular things any of you are interested in, I am happy to send those to you, but also I don't want to bog down everybody's mailboxes unless that's the wish of the commission, in which case I'm happy to do it. But again, if there's a particular thing you want that we have, I'm happy to send it to you.
Does anybody need more information, or are you comfortable with what you're getting?
Yes, absolutely, yes. Commissioner Hennessy had emailed me and I sent him what he requested.
All right. Thank you, Sarah. All right. We're going to take a brief break and then we'll be back for the public hearing. So after Christie makes an announcement, the commission will adjourn for the day. And the only thing left will be the public hearing that will be the rulemaking for public use beach and coastal waterfront. So Bob won't have to recuse himself. Christie, I'm going to let you come up.
I hope you all got and read my invitation that I sent out Monday, but I'm excited to have the commission and the CRAC and DCM staff all over to my home in Pointe Shores this evening. We're going to have some food and fellowship, and so I hope all of you guys can stop by for some period of time.
And what time would you like everybody to arrive? 'Cause
I'm going to leave right after this and grab some ice and then get home. So 30 minutes. My neighbors have been kind enough in our unit. So we're a circle drive. There's an entrance side and an exit side. They're labeled. Please do follow that. There's a lot of large live oaks, so just don't come whipping around the corner very fast, or else you're going to meet up with one of those live oaks, so just be careful. Most of my neighbors have agreed to let us use their spaces. I'm going to put pink cama tape on the spots not to use. So please just use the non-pink spaces. If those fill up, the Carteret County Library is right across the street next to the Pine Knoll Shores Fire Department. There's a few spaces in there too. So I hope to see you all there.
Thank you, Christie. Tankard, would you like to say anything? All right. Commission is going to recess for the day. The public hearing will still be held at 4:30 for the items that were on the agenda, and Rachel will conduct those. All right. Thank you all very much. I'll see you all at 9 o'clock in the morning.
Hearing will please come to order. Good afternoon. I would like to welcome you to today's public hearing on the Division of Coastal Management's proposal to use up to $50,000 in public beach and coastal waterfront access grant funds on a non-competitive basis to cover closing costs related to the North Carolina Coastal Land Trust's donation of Topsail South End parcel to the state of North Carolina. My name is Rachel Adrick, and I will serve as the hearing officer for this public hearing. The public comment period began on January 31st and ends on April 1st, 2026. If you would like to submit written or electronic comments in addition to or instead of any comments you may make today, please submit them to the DCM Director, Tancred Miller at the Division of Coastal Management, Morehead City Office, 400 Commerce Avenue, Morehead City, North Carolina, 28557, or dcmcomments@deq.nc.gov. I do want to emphasize that written and oral comments are treated equally. Therefore, if you do not have time to say everything you would like to say today, please provide written or electronic comments by April 1st. You may also leave written comments with any of the coastal management staff here today. The focus of this public hearing is to gather public comments and input. Therefore, staff may not be able to answer detailed questions once the formal portion of the hearing begins. The Division of Coastal Management's Public Beach and Waterfront Access Program provides grants to local governments to create or improve pedestrian access to public beaches and public trust waters in the 20 coastal counties. Eligible projects include land acquisition and site improvements such as beach mats, dune crossovers, boardwalks, and piers. The access rule found in 15A NCAC 07M.0707B authorizes the division to use public beach and coastal waterfront access funds on a non-competitive basis. However, prior to the expenditure of funds, DCM must hold a public hearing to discuss the proposal and invite the public to comment to the CRC for 60 days prior to expending non-competitive funding. DCM is proposing to use non-competitive funds to cover the closing costs associated with the state's acquisition of 96.07 acre tract in Topsail Beach, known as the Topsail South End Tract. The parcel was acquired by the North Carolina Coastal Land Trust for $7.5 million, and the ownership of the property will be transferred to the state, where DCM will manage and preserve the property for public benefit to support current and future public access to coastal waters. The Council of State has approved the acquisition, and the State Property Office is handling the closing. The state is responsible for closing costs, including deed preparation and recording fees, and if obtained, the cost of title insurance. The cost is estimated to be approximately $50,000. However, the exact amount of closing costs associated with the property transfer is currently unknown and will be determined at the time of closing. DCM is proposing to use up to $50,000 in access funds on a non-competitive basis to cover these closing costs. I will now call on those who have indicated a desire to comment on the proposal. Please limit your comments to matters relevant to the proposed non-competitive use of these funds. Each speaker is limited to 3 minutes. If you have written comments, please turn them into me, and please give your name and address before you begin comments. We have one person signed up for comments, and that is Mr. Frank Braxton.
Sounds good. Good evening or afternoon. My name is Frank Braxton. I'm the mayor of Topsail Beach, and I'm here, I guess, to represent the town in a matter that's very dear to our town. I had something written very intensive, but I think it's better to cut it a little bit short. This started many years ago, actually 21 years ago or more, and it was a issue of what's going to happen to that property. And we never knew. And then along came the Coastal Land Trust, the state, and a lot of private donors, and they made it happen. And they bought the property and resolved that issue for our town. We're at the goal line now, so we need to take that next step. and this may be a formality. However, I never trust a given. So I'm here tonight. There's no opposition at this point, but I'm here on behalf of the town to express our support for using the trust funds to close this property. I do thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Can I go on to 7B and just leave this one open? Okay. We will leave this hearing open and move on to the public hearing for 15A NCAC 07B. This public hearing is on the Coastal Resources proposed land use planning rules contained in 15A NCAC subchapter 7B in accordance with the Administrative Procedures Act. My name is Rachel Love Adrick, and I will serve as the hearing officer for this public hearing. The public comment period ends on March 16th. If you would like to submit written or electronic comments in addition to or instead of any comments you make today, please submit them to DCM Director Tancred Miller at the Division of Coastal Management's Morehead City office, 400 Commerce Avenue, Morehead City, North Carolina, 28557, or CRC rulemaking at deq.nc.gov. I want to emphasize that written and oral comments are treated equally. Therefore, if you do not have time to say everything you would like to say today, please provide written or electronic comments by March 16th. You may also leave written comments with any of the coastal management staff here today. Let's briefly explain how this hearing will work. Staff will prepare a summary of all comments for the CRC's considerations at its April meeting. The public is welcome to attend that meeting as well. The focus of today's public hearing is on gathering public comments and input. Therefore, staff may not be able to answer detailed questions once the formal portion of the hearing begins. The proposed rule adoptions to 15A NCAC 07B planning rules are following the periodic review. These rules set out the state guidelines that local governments in North Carolina's coastal area must follow to prepare, adopt, and certify land use plans under the Coastal Area Management Act. These rules define how coastal counties and eligible municipalities should plan for growth, resource protection, and development in a way that aligns with the goals of the CAMA. I will now call on those who have indicated desire to comment on the proposed rules. Please limit your comments to matters relevant to the proposed rules. Each speaker is limited to 3 minutes, and no one has signed up for public comment. So I'm going to leave the public hearings open until 4:31.